And it's BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And to those of you regular podcast listeners, you can go ahead and turn your volume all the way up for the video episodes. But today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays this year I've been discussing the story of the Phantom Killer, an unidentified serial killer who operated in Texarkana in 1946. And as you can see from the title of this episode, this series is coming to an end. And next week on the channel, I will be doing an episode about the New Orleans Axeman, another unidentified serial killer mystery from the Deep South, should we even call that Louisiana, the Deep South, the southern part of the United States, but it's not too far from Texarkana, where the Phantom Killer operated. And as previously stated, the Phantom Killer was an unidentified serial killer who committed a very elaborate, but perhaps not very sophisticated crime spree in Texarkana back in 1946. The first crime committed by the Phantom Killer was the attack on Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean LaRae, which occurred on February 22nd of 1946. This was the only time that the Phantom Killer had two victims that did survive. Two survivors. And the survivors were able to give a description of the perpetrator. They said that he was a man wearing some type of sack over his face, maybe even a pillowcase that had holes cut out for the eyes and one for the mouth. Then, what the Phantom Killer would do is, during the attack, he beat Jimmy Hollis with a blunt object, which may have been a gun, but then he sexually assaulted Mary Jean LaRae. The big difference between these two accounts from Mary Jean LaRae and Jimmy Hollis was that Hollis seemed to think that the killer was one race, and Mary Jean LaRae thought that he was of a different race. One thought he was Caucasian, the other thought he was African American. What really happened is still a mystery even to this day. And that really did not provide a lot of substantial details. The Phantom Killer's next attack would be that on Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore, which would occur on March 24th of 1946. So as you see, February 22nd to March 24th, a very substantial difference in the amount of time, or a substantial gap in the amount of time. This doesn't appear to be a serial killer who's going out every week, every weekend, or anything like that. No. There is a big time gap, and why? We aren't even sure to this day. It's absolutely mind-boggling about the time spacing and the Phantom Killer mystery. But both the victims did not survive, so we have no idea about any witness description of the perpetrator, but a .32 caliber automatic pistol was used. This is important, because the Phantom Killer's next attack would be the murders of Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin. Both the victims didn't survive again, yet the same .32 caliber automatic pistol was used. That is a link between two different crimes committed by the Phantom Killer. It's one of the few links in this case because, as you can see, this is part of an ongoing series, and I'll share some observations that I've made at the end, but the next and final crime that the Phantom Killer committed was on May 3rd of 1946, and it was the murder of Virgil Starks and the shooting of his wife, Katie Starks. Unlike the other victims who were in cars parked in lovers' lanes, Virgil Starks and Katie Starks were in their home. And Virgil Starks was sitting in an armchair. He was about to listen to a radio program, or listening to a radio program. He had read the newspaper, and he was attacked by the Phantom Killer. But Katie Starks was unable to get a good look at the perpetrator. She didn't even know if he was wearing the hooded costume or not. And that really brings some doubt on whether or not the attack on Virgil Starks and Katie Starks was even the Phantom Killer at all. Was this the same person? Because a different gun was used. A .22 caliber, not a .32 caliber. Different gun, different location, different MO, going from being a lover's lane spree killer to a home invader. Is that the same person? And then the crime stopped. Now, I was just reading an article from the New York Daily News talking about the Phantom Killer, and they proposed something very bold. They stated that there will never be a conclusion to this mystery. What do you think about that? I think it's highly possible that we could, indeed, have a conclusion to the Phantom Killer saga, because there is forensic evidence that has been left behind. Fingerprints and a palm print, and if somebody had some way of connecting the person to the Phantom Killer mystery, or some type of forensic material left behind, maybe someone's prints were somewhere on file, the actual perpetrator in these crimes. But the thing that I truly explored in this Phantom Killer series were these crimes all committed by the same person? And my honest answer at the end of this discussion on the Phantom Killer is no. I don't believe so. I definitely do not think the murder of Virgil Starks and Katie Starks was the same person who murdered the couples in Lover's Lanes. There just isn't enough evidence to establish a connection. And it's as simple as that. There's a lot of guessing. There is a lot of theorizing. But the hard evidence simply is not there. If you had Katie Stark saying, oh yeah, he was wearing the hooded Phantom Killer costume, sure. If it were the same pistol that was used in the other shootings, absolutely. That type of evidence is not present. And I even found one piece of writing during this series that said in 1948, the authorities were distancing themselves from the murder of Virgil Starks, or maybe in more appropriate terms, they believed that the murder of Virgil Starks was not the Phantom Killer. Now, what about the other crimes? Did the same person murder Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin and Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore and commit the attack on Mary Jean LaRae and Jimmy Hollis? If I had to bet my life on it, I would lean toward yes, but I think that there is such a high possibility that the answer to that question is also no. It's something like 51% yes, 49% no. And that's some strong consideration, 49% no. Why so strongly? We don't have any other sightings of this person wearing the hooded Phantom Killer costume. A gun was not used in the attack on Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean LaRae in the conventional sense. Therefore, where is the real link between and among all of these crimes? So, the Phantom Killer case is at a time when a lot of forensic science were in their infancy, and some of them hadn't even been born yet. 1946, in the post-World War II era, DNA was not a factor back then. And as somebody once said, though, that back in those days, they had bloodhounds, they had fingerprints, and they had intuition. That was the investigation. So, ultimately, I'm noticing that these are very different crimes that have somewhat of a... And that begs the question, though, what do we do about the suspects in the Phantom Killer case? Because there are at least 2 or 3 prime suspects that have been explored. Yule Swinney, Duty Tennyson, and the German prisoner of war, whom we simply refer to him by his description. And I also will give you the rather underwhelming conclusion that I don't think any of these major suspects were the Phantom Killer. I think that if they actually had evidence, or they actually had investigated and vetted these suspects as thoroughly as they say they did, they would have found something if they were actually looking at H.B. Tennyson or Yule Swinney. Instead, it appears that both of these men, as well as the German prisoner of war, just involve an enormous amount of speculation and mental gymnastics, stringing together a narrative that doesn't necessarily belong together. So that is one of the less than enjoyable things to hear. in this series that I've done on the Phantom Killer, I've also had the opportunity to talk a lot about the Zodiac Killer-Phantom Killer connection. And my ultimate response is that I don't think the Zodiac Killer and the Phantom Killer were the same person, but there are several suspects that do get incorporated into this, most notably Frank Lee Morris, who is the subject of the book My Dance with the Zodiac Killer, written by David Gold, and really Frank Lee Morris, as well as John and Clarence Anglin, at least 3 participants involved in a host of crimes across the 20th century, and Robert Ivan Nichols, whom Wildfire 99 talks about as a Phantom Killer suspect and a Zodiac Killer suspect. But I absolutely believe that the Phantom Killer was an inspiration for the Zodiac Killer. Someone who was committing very similar crimes. Both of them targeted serial killer. Both of them were serial killers who targeted victims at lovers' lanes. Both of them wore a hooded costume on at least one occasion. Both of them even used multiple firearms to commit the crimes. I mean, if it is true that Jimmy Hollis was beaten with a gun, we don't necessarily know that that was a different firearm, or the same firearm even. We are not sure. But a big difference is the Phantom Killer was a sexual predator, whereas the Zodiac was not. The Phantom Killer beat victims with a blunt object, and the Zodiac Killer did not. The Zodiac Killer stabbed victims, and the Phantom Killer did not. And the list goes on and on and on about all the differences and reasons why I believe that these individuals are not the same person, but I think that it's either the same person or the only other possibility is something quite different than I was saying last week, because I was responding to a video from Crime and Wine who said that either the Phantom Killer and the Zodiac are the same person, or it's a copycat. Nope. I will introduce a third possibility, even though I do believe it's number 2. I believe it's a copycat. It could be that they had very similar psychology. Very similar psychological operations were going on. And Dr. Anthony LaPaula, who made comments on the Phantom Killer, talked about how a spree killer would operate by saying that someone is not going to commit all the crimes in the same way to avoid getting caught. After committing 3 acts of murder, leading to, the Phantom Killer would have murdered 4 people at that time, then he's going to do something different to confuse the authorities, that this would be very normal and typical of a spree killer, the way that the Phantom Killer was, and the way that the Zodiac Killer was. So, I can comprehend that. But I just want to be very clear. This is an unsolved case. So we do have 3 possibilities. The Phantom is the Zodiac, the Zodiac copycatted the Phantom Killer crimes, or they just had very similar psychological issues, similar issues in their childhood. Maybe they were rejected by certain people, rejected by women and their peers, lack of sexual availability, and they became so frustrated that they were driven to kill. Right? You following me? Here's an alternative. The Phantom was something that could have been a creation of the media, that the media took these unrelated events and stitched them together. The hooded man at the Hollis and LeRae attack, the second person who was targeting the victims parked in cars where there were no survivors, and the murder of Virgil Starks, which had a different gun, different MO, no solid witness descriptions, and that the media just simply thought that this was all the same person, when in reality you would have had at least 3 different people in unrelated attacks. Now, it's almost like there's the beginning of a Phantom Killer hoax theory, the way that there's a Jack the Ripper hoax theory and a Zodiac Killer hoax theory. Now, is that what actually happened? I'll believe it when the evidence suggests that. As of now, because of that .32 caliber gun that was used in multiple crimes, if that is indeed true, then I'm tempted to say that I think the hoax would be rather unlikely, and that there does appear to be an attacker in Texarkana, who had some reason for going after lovers' lanes. But I've had reversals in the past. And what do you think? You can share your ideas in the comment section down below and put anything you want. I would love to know what you guys think about the Phantom Killer and possible Zodiac Killer connections, perhaps inspirations from Jack the Ripper. And when we get to the series about the New Orleans Axeman, we will see some definitive connections to Jack the Ripper. And these serial killers are learning from each other. I genuinely believe this, that they are familiar with the way that the Ripper operated, or the way the Axeman operated, the way the Phantom Killer operated, then getting to the Zodiac Killer, and then you have, in the 1990s, the Zodiac Killer copycat, who was captured, mind you, Eddie Seda, in New York. And it begs the question about, are these people all just studying the serial killers of the past, or are they just twisted and demented in their own particular way? So I would like to invite you to like and subscribe to Black Box Online Radio. There are now more than 1,000 episodes here on this channel, and you can go through all of the playlists and the old episodes about the Phantom Killer and the Zodiac, as well as some other serial killer stories if you are curious, such as last year's introduction to the New Orleans Axeman, as well as the episodes on Jack the Ripper, at the episodes on other serial killers such as the Unabomber and BTK. It is fascinating. Terrible, but fascinating all the same. Alright, well that's all for me now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and anybody who wants to support these efforts can go over to BuyMeACoffee.com. There's a link to that in the description box, and anybody who makes a contribution or donation to help support the show via BuyMeACoffee.com will get a shout-out on the Monday episodes. Every Monday is Zodiac Monday here on this channel. Thank you so much for listening. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. And I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.